Welcome to Module 2 of the CIS 231 Human Computer Interaction. I'm your professor, Dr. English Dowdell. We're going to talk about today how humans learn new interfaces. Now let's start with a question. I want you to think about the last new app or website or platform that you had to learn. Now, maybe it was a new social media app, maybe it was a work system, or maybe a new school platform. What did you do first? Now, did you click around randomly? Did you look for something familiar? Did you watch a video? Or did you ask someone for help? Here, the key thing I want you to notice is that everyone has a learning strategy. Even if you don't think you do, you do. Now I want to connect this to the previous module in Module 1, the information that we talked about then. We talked about what digital communications, interfaces, and how tools like Microsoft Teams, shape how we interact. Now in this module, we're zooming in on what happens in your head when you encounter a new interface. Now here's something designers often forget. Interfaces assume users already know things. And when those assumptions are wrong, then friction happens. Now, this brings us to one of the most important concepts in human-computer interaction, and that's mental models. Now, a mental model is how you think a system works, not how it actually works, not how the designer intended it to work, how you believe it works. And where do mental models come from? They come from past experiences. You don't approach a new system, say, with a blank slate. You bring everything you've used before with you. Now, this is a book that I'd like for you. It's not mandatory, but it's a good book that really talks about like mental models and things like that. It's called The Design of Everyday Thinking. So if you've got an opportunity to pick it up or to read it, I'll see if I can maybe find some links where you can maybe acquire it easily to place in the course room. But this is a book that I'd really like for you guys to take a look at. Now let's talk about some of these mental models in action. For example, you see an icon. It looks like a trash can. So what do you assume? You assume that it deletes something, right? If you see like these three horizontal lines here, you assume that's a menu, okay? If you click something that say looks like a button, then you expect something to happen. That's your mental model at work. Problems occur when the system doesn't behave the way that your mental model expects it to. For instance, you click and nothing happens, or something unexpected happens, or the system does something silently. That's when confusion starts. And this is where one of the most important ideas come from with Don Norman. That's what he talks about in his book. Okay, so here's a reality check. Users don't read manuals, okay? They don't read instructions. They don't read help pages. They try to figure it out. Okay, good design doesn't require users to rethink how the world works. Good design matches the user's existing mental models or gently helps them form new ones. So let's talk about how systems communicate with users. This is where feedback comes in. Feedback answers three critical questions for the user. One, did something happen? Two, what did it mean? And three, what should I do next? Now, without feedback, users are forced to what? Guess. Okay, and guessing can create anxiety. Now, think about a loading spinner. Okay, it's not exciting, but it tells you that the system heard you and something's happening. Okay, now think about submitting a form and seeing nothing. Okay, no message, no confirmation, no error message. So you wonder, did it submit? Did it fail? Should I click again? This is what we call silent failure, and it's probably one of the most frustrating user experiences. In HCI, we say that systems should constantly talk back to users, okay? Not with words necessarily, but with signals. Some kind of visual feedback, maybe messages, or maybe a change in the state. When a system goes quiet, users will feel lost. Okay, I want to slow down here because this part is going to be extremely important for user interface design. If you understand these two ideas that we're going to talk about, you'll never look at an interface the same way. Now, it's called Gulf of Execution and the Gulf of Evaluation. Okay, let's start with the Gulf of Execution. Now, this is the gap between what a user wants to do and figuring out how to do it in the interface. In other words, the moment a user asks, what am I supposed to do here? This gap happens, and it happens before the action. Now, this means that the user has a goal, okay, but the interface isn't clearly telling them how to achieve it. Now, think about opening a new app for the first time, okay? You're looking at the screen and you're thinking, okay, where do I start? Okay, what button matters? Which text is clickable? Is this icon decorative or is it part of the functionality? Every time a user hesitates, even for a second, that's the gulf of execution. Now, in UI terms, this gulf gets wider, say, when buttons don't look like buttons, okay? Icons aren't labeled. Important actions are hidden. Or maybe the interface relies on some kind of insider knowledge. The interface is basically saying, you should already know this, okay? And the user is thinking, I do not. Good UI design reduces the gulf of execution by making actions obvious. It answers the question before the user has to ask it. Now let's talk about the gulf of evaluation. Now this happens after the user takes an action. Okay, the user clicks or taps or submits or swipes and then asks, did anything happen? Okay, this is where feedback becomes critical. The gulf of evaluation is the gap between what the system actually did and what the user can perceive that it did. Now, if the system responds clearly, then the gulf is small, okay? But if the system is silent or vague, then the gulf becomes huge, okay? So think about like submitting a form, okay? You click submit. If you see a confirmation message, great. Okay, if the page refreshes with no explanation, now you're confused. Okay, if nothing happens at all, then you panic. Now the user's wondering, did the form submit, or did it fail? Should I click again? Did I break something? That uncertainty is the gulf of evaluation. Now here's why this is especially important for UI designers. Users don't blame the interface. What have we been saying? They blame themselves. They think, oh, I must be doing something wrong. Over time, that leads to frustration, avoidance, or even abandonment. Now, from a design perspective, every interface interaction has two responsibilities. First, make it clear what actions are possible. And then second, make it clear what happened after the action. If either one of these is missing, the user falls into like one of these gulfs. So I want to connect this back to mental models, what we talked about earlier. So when a system matches a user's mental model, what they're expecting, then the gulf of execution is smaller. Okay? When the system provides clear, immediate feedback, the gulf of evaluation is smaller. When either one of these fails, the user is going to feel lost. And when both fail at the same time, that's when people say, oh, this app is horrible. Now, this doesn't just happen in consumer apps. Think about a workplace system. You submit like a help desk ticket, okay? You click submit, no confirmation, no email, no status update. You're now stuck in both gulfs. You weren't fully sure how the process worked, that's execution, and then you have no idea if the action worked, that's evaluation. That's not just bad UX, that's bad organizational design. Now, here's why I want you thinking about this before the activity that you have to do this week. You're going to be playing this game called Tempest. Okay, Tempest intentionally widens both gulfs. Okay, you'll ask, when you go to play this game, what do I do? And did that do anything? That discomfort that you're going to feel in this week's activity or this module's activity is not accidental. It's designed to make you feel what users feel. So as you interact with Tempest, I want you to notice like when you hesitate, okay, when you guess, when you repeat actions just to see what happens, or when you feel unsure. Those moments are gold for UI designers. They show you exactly like where an interface is failing to be able to support the user. Now here's the takeaway from this lecture, okay, that I want you to leave with after you watch this lecture. Good UI design is not about making things look pretty. It's about clarity. It's about helping people or helping users cross that gulf of execution and the gulf of evaluation with confidence. When users always know what can I do and what just happened, then that's when an interface feels intuitive. Okay, so that brings us to talking about this module's assignment. Okay, so for this module, you're going to play the game Tempest that we've been talking about. Okay, now Tempest is intentionally designed to remove things that we would normally rely on. Those are things like clear goals and familiar signifiers and helpful feedback. And that frustration that you're going to feel, that's the point. Okay, now, I want you to be very clear about something. Not solving the game doesn't mean that you failed. Okay, this assignment is not about winning, it's not about completion, it's about noticing things. Noticing where you felt confused, noticing what assumptions you made, noticing what feedback you wanted but you didn't get. That frustration, that's data. Okay, as designers and developers and analysts, confusion teaches us empathy. It reminds us what it feels like to be a new user. So as you work through Tempest, keep this in mind. Okay, your experience is the assignment. Okay, now you'll post your experience in the discussion. Okay, so in your post, I want you to analyze your experience with Tempest. By answering different questions. There's a question in step 2 within the course room, within the assignment instructions. Okay. And then I want you to reflect on, what did this experience tell you about how you approach interfaces that you don't already understand? And then I want you to reflect if you were designing an interface for an app or a website and wanted it to be helpful, not confusing, how might you apply something from your analysis of Tempest? Now, I know that this is an independent study course, but if there are other peers that have joined the discussion, then I want you to reply to at least one of them by comparing your approaches to solving the game or to completing the game or playing the game. Now, next time, we'll talk about how to translate that experience into design insight.